Hi, everybody. Welcome. I'm Suzanne Gundersen of Transform Connections. I offer stress resilience solutions that empower people to self-heal. And I'm joined today with Leckey Harrison, who's one of my colleagues in this wonderful space of stress and trauma healing. And we're going to talk about how stress is not conscious. It's something that's automatic. So Leckey, welcome. Please introduce yourself.
Well, as you already said, my name is Leckey Harrison. I own a business called Raise Your Resilience, and I empower people how to heal themselves using an innate mechanism that evolution has given to us. And stress and trauma are intimately acquainted, so we will be touching on that some time down the pike. For today, like you said, the difference between a conscious and an autonomic response.
Yes.
We have 7 minutes.
There we go. So Leckey, you and I have been talking a lot about what we've learned over the years in our studies of the nervous system and neurobiology and the human body and its nervous system. And one of the things that we just recently had a short conversation on, which I really thought would be great to record and share with everybody, was around how stress is something that's automatic to the body. It's not a conscious response. And I think it's so important for people to kind of learn that we can evolve more than just our mind and our mental thinking processes. So could you share with us, a little bit about what your thoughts are on how to talk about, how to learn how the body is responsible for the stress response as opposed to our conscious mind?
If the stress response was conscious, we'd all be dead. Every once in a while, I might drift into an illustration from my self-defense classes, but I'll try to refrain from doing so. The brain, as we know, is 3 parts. There's the reptile brain, there's the emotional brain, which is the midbrain, and then the prefrontal cortex, which is what makes us human. The distinctions are that the autonomic stuff, your body temperature, your pH, your heart rate, all of that stuff happens without my having to do anything about it. The pH, for example, if the pH were up to me, I would be dead because it's a very, very small window and the body does not respond well when it's not set right. So it takes care of it on its own. The stress response is very, very similar to that. The brain receives some sort of information, some sort of sensory information. So that could be the cerebellum in the back, the olfactory areas, something we taste, something we feel on our skin, which pretty much by and large bypasses the prefrontal cortex. That information is processed by the midbrain, which is the mammalian brain. If it searches memory and sees that this is a threat, then the brainstem takes over. And now we're talking autonomic realm. We enter the state of fight, flight, or freeze, depending on how fast that sense of terror and helplessness accelerates, is the word I'm looking for. So when it's because otherwise we sit there going, well, is this really a threat or not? Well, a threat moving at speed, that speed is what just caused you to be some animal's lunch, because our nervous system is hundreds of thousands of years old. So that was the issue that we dealt with. Mm-hmm. Maybe we ran into another caveman here or there that might have been a threat, but primarily our threat was either something wanted us for lunch or was going to fight us for our lunch because we just killed one.
So right, and those are all parts of our evolutionary nervous system that we need still in today's day and age. It's just we're still stuck on using those ancient strategies to resolve kind of modern day issues. And I want to kind of go back to because you said so much just there, and I want to go back to the stimuli that's out there that we then perceive as threat could come even from a thought in our own mind, as well as what's out there in the environment around us. So it could be a thought that we think, it could be something that we feel in our body, it could be a sense that we have from coming into the environment from around us, it could be something that someone else said. So all these different things are things that we perceive And through that perception, we then begin to communicate to the brain, trying to rationalize what is going on here. But the first stop is that autonomic response of, let me just primitively survive for myself. I think what's happened to
Exactly.
us is that we live in a world where we're just overstimulated and bombarded with stimulation, and we don't ever resolve that stress response. We stay in that very autonomic stress response state, and it gets compounded, and so we get stuck there. And for the fact that, we use our conscious mind to solve so many problems that we've studied and learned, and the prefrontal cortex is so wise and has so much wisdom, we've convinced ourselves that the conscious mind is everything. But really, the wisdom of the body is what is not only going to save us with that stress response automatically, but also is going to help us to keep us alive, and will only release its response when it perceives that safety. And that's not something that you can convince yourself of mentally. You could be in a burning building and say, I'm really okay, but your body says, no, I feel the heat. I got instincts to run. Can't stay here, you know?
Exactly. And there's a couple things in that. One is when I created my definition of stress, I used the word perceived for a good reason. And that's partly because if you look at a timeline of history, agriculture goes back maybe 12,000 years, maybe 13,000 years. Our history predates that significantly as a species. So if you were to lay a timeline out, all of the major changes from agriculture forward, I mean, if you just had a 20-foot tape, everything happens starting with agriculture in the last foot. And most of the major stuff in the last 500 years is in the last inch.
Mm-hmm.
So our perceptions, we haven't changed, the world around us has changed. And so we have an autonomic system, and you're right. It is meant to be an autonomic cycle. Goes on, goes off. There's a certain process for it going off that Dr. Levine talks about. But we develop that state, and here's how I think the perception of threat begins to change. As that cycle goes on and doesn't go off, it stays in the body. The body now it's basically still on alert. Then another cycle happens. Then another cycle happens. So what ends up happening to the radar is, what used to be looking at a very, very distinct face that was in front of me that had certain dots or stripes or whatever and had big teeth and claws that I didn't want anything to do with, that has now changed to, there's our 7 minutes, something slightly different. So this perception of threat, the radar in a sense gets really, really broad. So instead of looking for, a specific type of bird, boy, any bird sets it off and we're triggered, and that autonomic response is exactly what happens. We feel threatened. What does feeling threatened look like in our behavior, in our speech, in the way we carry our bodies?
Mm-hmm.
And that's all autonomic. And the correction of that is not going to be from a conscious level.
Right, exactly. And so you just said so much there again, too. It's that, if one time we perceive that bird as a threat, we stored that memory somewhere, and now all of a sudden we see lots of birds, we react to the same way to every single one of them, when truly each one deserves its own reaction. And yet, because we're just overstimulated all the time, it just happens so much faster than the conscious mind can think. The body just responds, so much faster. And this is why I love Porges' word neuroception, because to intuit that and to insinuate that perception is the only way that we know how to respond, it seems so small. I think that neuroception, his word, just gives that depth and breadth to what it is that's really happening, because it's in our mind, it's in our body, it's out in the world, it's how we're communicated to, it's all that wrapped up, and that we can't consciously think that fast. We think we can. So many people have studied to believe that we can, but really, truly, the body is what is automatically responding to that sensory input, and goes directly up to takes that messaging right through the vagus nerve, directly up to the brainstem, and says, Are we safe? Are we not safe? And because there's so much happening all the time threatening us, we wake up to global awareness, we wake up to our overstimulated lives, and we're just reconditioned ourselves from a baseline of, safety to a baseline of threat. And this is why we've got so many chronic issues in the world.
Exactly.
So I hope that people who've been listening have found this helpful, in that we really need to appreciate and understand that our body has so much wisdom. Our body keeps us alive. Our body is automatically, keeping us in a mode that keeps us functioning every single day. Even if that's a dysfunctional way, it keeps us going.
Yep.
And that while the thinking mind has come up with lots and lots of amazing evolutionary ideas and concepts and inventions, it really can't do the job that the body does at automatically responding to stress. We spent many, many years, thinking that the mind can solve the problems, and for some problems it has. But really, I think we're coming into a time to let that automatic part of our body resolve. And I'm sorry, I interrupted you. Did you want to say something else?
Well, one of the things that happens during stress is it shunts blood to where it's needed,
Right.
and it takes it from here.
Sure.
It's called hypofrontality, and it's an actual decrease in blood. And so as the stress response goes on, this begins to then atrophy. And that's nothing new, but how do we then make decisions, or how do we even come up with inventions or anything else like that?
How do you learn?
This
How
is
do you
so
learn?
challenging.
Right? How do you learn when there's no blood flowing in the brain? Yeah.
When you look at what's going on in the world today, which has, I think, somewhat expanded in my last half century of living, what I see is this not working.
Yeah.
What I see is the emotions not working. And what I see is trauma working. And partly that's because when we're under stress, the hypofrontality and the atrophy start to combine. And boy, we think we're smart, but we're not.
Yeah.
Not so
I
much.
mean, it's time that the mind and the body truly become integrated again. In the evolution of our thinking mind, it's left the body, it's gone off, and now it's high time, since the body keeps the score, not my word, Bessel van der Kolk's word.
Yes,
The body's kept the score. We need to reattach the head back onto the body and find a way to rationalize things, integrate things, regulate things, so that we can live walking integrated through life, and know that our body was built in, even from our most ancient survival strategy, to keep us alive and functioning. So we just need to bring those pieces back together. So,
right.
so thanks so much, Leckey, for having this conversation today. If anyone watching this is interested, please reach out to either one of us to ask questions, and we look forward to hearing any comments that you have on this video. We'll see you in the next one.
Right.
Bye, everyone.
See ya.